Welcome back, students. In part A, we learned about the causes of the French Revolution, the debt, unfair taxes, bread shortages, and new ideas of equality. Now, in part B, we'll see how ordinary people forced extraordinary changes, how France moved from monarchy to republic through chaos, terror, and finally to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. Ready? Let's dive in. In May 1789, King Louis XVI faced a huge problem. He needed more money. But remember, in France, the king could not just impose taxes on his own. He had to call a meeting of the States General, a kind of parliament where all three states were represented. But here is the catch. The States General had not met for 175 years. Imagine dusting off an old classroom that hasn't been opened since your great grandparents were alive. The first state, the clergy, sent 300 representatives. The second state, the nobles, sent 300 as well. The third state, the common people, sent 600 representatives. But were they treated equally? Not really. They had to stand at the back of the hall while nobles and clergy sat in comfort. And when it came to voting, each state got one vote. So even though the third state represented the majority of the French population, their voice could be silenced by the other two. Does that sound fair to you? Of course not. And the third state thought the same. When their demand for one person, one vote was rejected, the third state walked out in protest. On 20 June 1789, they gathered in an indoor tennis court near Versailles. There they made a historic promise. They would not disperse until they had written a new constitution for France. This movement became famous as the Tennis Court Oath. It was the birth of the National Assembly, a group that saw itself as the true representative of the French people. Leaders like Mirabeau, a fiery speaker, and Abbassius, a priest who wrote the pamphlet What is the Third State, inspired the crowd. Step by step, the revolution was gaining momentum. But what was happening outside these halls of politics? Paris and the countryside were restless. Bread prices had shot up after a bad harvest. Women spent hours in long bakery lines only to return empty-handed. Angry crowds broke into shops. Rumors spread that nobles were hiring criminals to destroy peasant crops. Fear turned into rage. Villagers picked up pitchforks and attacked noble manors, burning records of feudal dues. Many nobles fled France, fearing for their lives. The country was spinning out of the king's control. Faced with this storm, the National Assembly acted. On the night of 4th August 1789, in a dramatic session, the Assembly abolished feudal privileges. No more tithe to the church, no more feudal dues to the lords. Lands owned by the church were taken over by the state. It was a huge shift. Centuries of tradition collapsed in one night. France was on its way to becoming something new. By 1791, the National Assembly completed the draft of a new constitution. The idea was simple. The king would no longer have unlimited power. Instead, power would be divided between the legislature, executive, and judiciary. France had become a constitutional monarchy. But here is an important detail. Not everyone got the right to vote. Only men above 25 years of age who paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of a laborer's wages were called active citizens. Women and poorer men were considered passive citizens. The constitution also included the famous Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. It guaranteed rights like life, freedom of speech, and equality before law as natural and inalienable. It looked like a new dawn, but trouble was brewing. Louis XVI was not happy about losing his power. Secretly, he contacted the King of Prussia to help restore his authority. Neighboring monarchs were alarmed. What if revolutionary ideas spread to their countries? So in 1792, the National Assembly declared war against Austria and Prussia. Thousands of volunteers rushed to join the army, singing the song that would become France's national anthem, the Marseillaise. Meanwhile, in Paris, political clubs were buzzing. The most famous was the Jacobin Club. Unlike the rich leaders of earlier assemblies, Jacobins came from the less privileged sections: shopkeepers, artisans, daily wage workers. Their leader, Maximilien Robespierre. Many Jacobins adopted a new style of dress, long striped trousers instead of aristocratic knee breeches. They called themselves the sans-culottes, meaning those without knee breeches. Wearing the red liberty cap, they stood as symbols of the common people. In the summer of 1792, Paris exploded again. Food shortages and rising prices led angry crowds supported by Jacobins to storm the palace of the Tuileries. The king's guards were massacred and the royal family imprisoned. Elections followed, and this time all men over 21 could vote, regardless of wealth. The newly elected body called the Convention abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic on 24 September 1792. For the first time in French history, the people were sovereign. No more king, no more hereditary throne. The revolution had reached a new stage. But what about Louis XVI? He was put on trial for treason for betraying the nation by contacting foreign powers. On 21st January 1793, in front of a massive crowd at the Place de la Concorde, Louis XVI was executed by the guillotine. His wife Marie Antoinette met the same fate shortly after. Can you imagine the shock? A king, once considered chosen by God, now executed by his people. It sent waves across Europe. After the king's death, France entered its most violent phase. Robespierre and the Jacobins believed that enemies of the Republic had to be eliminated at any cost. Nobles, clergy, rival politicians, and even ordinary people who were suspected of opposing the revolution were arrested, tried, and executed. The guillotine became a daily sight. Robespierre also imposed strict economic controls, maximum wages and prices, rationing of bread and meat, and a ban on using expensive wheat flour. Everyone had to eat the so-called bread of equality. Even speech was regulated. Instead of saying monsieur or madame, people had to call each other citizen. Churches were closed and turned into offices or barracks. But Robespierre's harsh policies made him unpopular. By July 1794, even his supporters turned against him. He was arrested and sent to the guillotine himself. After Robespierre, the revolution entered a new phase. A new constitution created an executive body called the Directory with 5 members. It was designed to prevent the rise of another dictator, but the Directory was weak and corrupt. Constant clashes between the councils and the Directory created instability. Who stepped in to restore order? A young, ambitious general named Napoleon Bonaparte. His military successes made him popular. By the late 1790s, Napoleon was ready to seize the power. In 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of France, ending the revolutionary decade. But Napoleon also carried many revolutionary ideas across Europe: equality before law, abolition of feudalism, and modern legal systems. So, what did the French Revolution achieve? It destroyed the feudal system. It showed that kings could be challenged and removed. It popularized ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity that spread across Europe and later to colonies around the world. In India, leaders like Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy were inspired by these ideas. The revolution also left behind warnings that the fight for freedom can sometimes turn violent and that power can corrupt even the leaders of change. But its greatest legacy is clear. It lit the torch of democracy and human rights for the modern world. And that brings us to the end of the French Revolution Part B. We began with the States General and saw how France transformed, first into a constitutional monarchy, then a republic, then a period of terror, and finally Napoleon's empire. History is never simple, but the French Revolution reminds us that ordinary people, when united, can reshape their society for better or worse. Thank you for joining, and remember, revolution don't just happen in history books. They begin when people dare to ask, is this fair? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let me know your suggestions in the comments. You can watch Hindi explanation of the chapter as well.